Rad. Okay, we are online. Gotta fix our screen. If you call it love, you just wanna be the one that I call baby you. Alright. That looks really fucking bad. Why does that look so bad all of a sudden? Okay. That looks like shit. Why does that look so shitty? Hey, Dark Horse 99, how's it going? Good to see you on Twitch. I had to change my shirt because it was keying out my shirt, making it look all fuzzy and bad. I'm about to start up on TikTok. I just started. Our commander tonight is Storm, Force of Nature. We got a little teamer Storm commander going on. I'm pretty good. I am pretty good. I'm about to hit 1,000 followers on Instagram, which is exciting for me. Yeah, so there's that. We're about to do some teamer Storm. Do a little bit of live deck building. Gonna hang out, gonna talk about some cardboard. Yeah. Alright. We're gonna open up our browser. So I'm actually not super familiar with Storm strategies. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, we are building Storm Force of Nature. This is a teamer commander. This thing is a Marvel secret lair. That's why this thing is 70 bucks. It's a 3/4, it flies, it vigilance. It has a trigger that when it deals combat damage, the next instant sorcery spell we cast this turn has Storm. Storms means that we copy it for each spell we cast this turn. It's cool. So we're hoping to see some stormy cards today. And when I think Storm, I think little cantrippy spells. I think like a Brainstorm. Let's talk about a Brainstorm. Brainstorm's like a 2-mana instant, excuse me, a 1-mana instant. It's mono blue. It says draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library. This thing's very cool. It's very useful. If your deck cares about stacking the top of your library, maybe you're casting free stuff off the top, Brainstorm is a great way to stack the first 2 cards of your deck with stuff from your hand. This thing's really cool. It's great. This version's $3, but I'm pretty sure you can get this card for like a quarter. This is just a really good common. It's printed a lot. It's an instant. It's 1 mana. It draws you 3 cards. So if your commander cares about like draw card triggers, this draws 3 for 1 mana at instant speed. It's great for that. I run it in my Locust God build, and you often see it in Storm builds to draw out the deck. When I say Storm, I mean Storm the deck archetype, not our commander tonight, Storm Force of Nature. If you have a suggestion for our commander, Storm Force of Nature tonight, please put it in the comments, y'all. Hey everybody, I'm BGM, I'm a video editor and streamer, and on lives, we do live deck building. Tonight, we are doing a Storm build in Teamer colors, and when I think Storm builds, I think little cantrippy little spells, typically instants, typically in red and in blue. This is a Braid. It's a 2-mana mono red instant. This one came out in the, this printing came out in the Innistrad Remastered block. It's an instant that lets you destroy an artifact or deal 3 damage to target creature. It's cool. It's a cool little piece of removal. In Commander, it's normally used to get rid of artifacts. But also, if you can just storm this off, you can deal a crap ton of damage off the Abrade if it's what we're storming off with Storm. Hey everybody, how are you doing? I hope you all had a good weekend. Happy Monday. We are doing Storm for our Storm Commander tonight. So far, we've seen a Brainstorm. We've seen a Abrade. Let's talk about Chandra's Goggles. Have y'all seen Chandra's Goggles? Chandra's Goggles are a cool little rock. It's like a 5-mana rock. It taps for colorless. And I think it's like Pyromancer's Goggles. Yeah, it's Pyromancer's Goggles. Pyromancer's Goggles. It's a 5-mana rock. And it says that when you can tap it for red, but when you tap it for red, if you use it to cast a red instant or sorcery spell, you copy that spell and you get new targets for the copy. This thing was just reprinted. It's only $2.50. It is a 5-mana mana rock that taps for a singular mana, and that part's bad. But who gives a shit? Because it copies your red instants and sorceries, which is very cool. And in a Storm deck, where we're trying to get a high Storm count as possible, this thing's crazy. I would run this thing. I like it a lot, actually. Considering building Halsin, Food, Bear, Tribal, I just wish he was as hot in MTG as he was in Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, Jarek Hall, I agree with you there. Halsin, you know, if Halsin had a beard, he would be too powerful. He would need to be nerfed Hey, Recon, good to see you. Gonna be a monster and ask for Snap. Snap's wonderful. I love Snap. Snap is such a cool little instant. I played Snap when I first got into MTG. Snap's really good. It's like a 2-mana mono blue instant. Yeah, this thing. You return target creature to its owner's hand. It doesn't have to be your creature. It can be your opponent's. It's instant speed, and you untap 2 lands at instant speed. This thing's amazing. In Time Spiral and the set where this card was originally printed, they printed a bunch of stuff that wasn't quite free spells, but if you had the mana to tap for it, it untaps the lands that you needed to tap to cast the spell. Snap is from that cycle of cards. Snap is wonderful. This is a free, just instant speed, return something to target opponent's hand, or even our hand. It's very cool. Also, if you're running bounce lands or lands that tap for multiple mana, Snap can untap multiple mana lands and make you mana positive. This thing's very cool. Also, if you storm off with it, it's gonna be crazy. I like Snap. Snap's a good suggestion. I did not think of Snap. Thank you for that suggestion. I appreciate that. Kai Brazil, thank you very much for the Snap. It's a ritual of land auras. I just built this. Oh, Duffel, you built this last Friday? Would you tell me a little bit about it, please? No, let's talk about High Tide. I haven't seen High Tide yet. Hey, everybody, I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer talking about Magic the Gathering nonsense. And on lives, we do live deck building. We're talking about Stormforce of Nature, and we just got suggested this here High Tide. It's a 1-mana blue instant that says, until end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds an additional blue. This thing's coconuts in the Storm deck. Oh my god, this thing is going to make us do so much math. You know, it's pretty cool, though. Like, if you are trying to storm off and win the game, this thing just makes you a crap ton of mana. A crap ton of mana. If you storm it off and you make copies off Storm's damage trigger, your islands are going to tap for like 3, 4, 5 apiece off this thing. That's very cool. I like this a lot, actually. Very cool card. Thank you very much for the suggestion. Hey, Sandy Lee, how's it going? I don't play MTG, but I think you're a very cool guy. Sandy Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate you a lot. It's really funny because I have 2 very distinct audiences. One is the Magic the Gathering community, and the other are gay men who want to play with me no matter what the game is. So thank you, Sandy Lee, for stopping by. I appreciate it. That's a very nice comment. Thank you. Kunk suggests you win with Snap Archaeomancer. Let's pull up the Archaeomancer. And enough High Tide activations. Yeah, so Archaeomancer puts instants and sorceries from your graveyard into your hand, right? It's like an ETB. It's Archaeomancer. It's 4 mana. It's like a blue human. It enters the battlefield. It finds an instant. Yeah, here, this thing. It enters the battlefield. You find an instant or sorcery in your graveyard. You slam it back into your hand. This thing's great. But in regards to Storm, I would run something, unless we're doing like a blink effect and we care about ETB triggers. If we cared about ETB triggers a lot, I would run Archaeomancer. But because we're in green, I'm not thinking Eternal Witness, I'm thinking Regrowth. Regrowth itself is a sorcery, which is very cool. It's 2 mana, return target card. It can be any card. It's half as much mana as Archaeomancer. Archaeomancer can get more value if we have a blink engine, but this thing, it could just be cool to storm off with Storm. Put all our gas back into our hand, maybe put the High Tide back, maybe put that little Snap back. This thing's cool, though. I like Regrowth. Regrowth is one of my favorite effects. Most things that put cards from your graveyard back into your hand start at 3 mana. Regrowth starts at 2. Cons about Regrowth, it's a sorcery. But I like Regrowth. Regrowth's cool. Sphinx Bone Wand. Austin S suggests a Sphinx Bone Wand. You got a Bone Wand for me? Austin's got a Bone Wand. It's a Sphinx Bone Wand. It's 7 mana. It's colorless, and it's 60 cents. And I have no idea what set symbol that is. But whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you put a charge counter on your Bone Wand, and if you do, it deals damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to target creature or player. This thing's cool. It gives me a little bit of pause, though, because it's 7 mana. It's 7 mana, and that gives me a little bit of pause. But it does. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you make sure to charge counter on this thing. If you do, it deals damage. It's cool. It's gonna crap out tons of damage. If we're storming off, I'm not sure if we copy. Do we cast the copies? If there are any judges in the audience, could you let me know if we cast the copies off of Storm's Storm Trigger? That would be good to know. If we do cast the copies, this thing's gonna kill people. This thing's amazing. Actually, if we do cast copies, this thing is insane. I'm trying to get her as a commander. She seems super fun and kind of want to do her as CDH. Honestly, Bulls' Sage, I kind of think Storm and just Storm strategies lend themselves to CDH naturally, because you're trying to win the game now in a Storm strategy. Like you don't want people to interact. You want to do it at instant speed. You want to combo off. That's just how Storm wins. Like if a Storm, like you can't pull up to the casual commander pod with a Storm deck with only combo victories, because either you're gonna get stomped out by creatures or you're gonna make everybody have a bad time. So I kind of think that Storm strategies and Storm herself kind of lend themselves to CDH. So we just got our Sam's Air. Thank you very much for the suggestion, even though it's disgusting. Let's talk about Expropriate. Expropriate is one of my least favorite cards in the game. Expropriate is diabolical. It's 15 bucks. It's a 9-mana mono blue sorcery that says you can either give the person casting this a permanent, or you can give them an extra turn. This thing's nuts. All right, everybody, I want you to all be responsible and knowledgeable. Never give anybody an extra turn. An extra turn in a Storm deck means they can probably pull it out of the graveyard, cast it again. Don't give people casting Expropriate extra turns. People casting Expropriate are not your friends. This thing's nuts. This used to be a really bad feel bad card for me when I first started playing, because it ended the game, and it ended the game in a really time crunchy way because they were getting a bunch of extra turns because I was a newer player and I didn't know better. And I gave them an extra turn, and then they would just go crazy. So once Expropriate's casted, they probably won. You're just waiting to figure out how. In my opinion. It's an undoubtedly powerful card, and if you copy it, you're just gonna win. If you storm off with Expropriate, I'm just gonna scoop. I don't wanna... Me personally, I'm scooping. Hey Gunnar, good to see you! Me when BGM is deck build. Hey Gunnar, good to see you. I'm making a deck with Gabe. Do you have any suggestions? Gabe Grower Spores. Actually, I do have some suggestions, Zargon. Hey Frosty. So, when regards to Gabe Grower Spores, we saw quite a few good fungus creatures, because Gabe kind of cares about sapperlings and funguses. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But we did a fungal, like we did a Micro Tyrant live deck tech. You can check out the Micro Tyrant live deck tech on Moxfield if you want to see what cards would go great in Gabe Grow Sports, because that's also a sapperling and a fungal commander. You can check that out on my Moxfield page if you want to. Or if you wanted to sign up to the Discord and you can suggest Gabe Grow Spores to our commander suggestions box. We're actually doing Storm because it was voted on in the Discord. The Bigger Gayer Discord voted, and they picked Storm. This is Twining Staff, suggested by our friend of the channel, Frost Ace. It's a 3-mana, $9 artifact, and if you would copy a spell one or more times, instead copy it that many times, plus an additional time, and you may choose new copies, you may choose new targets for the copies. You can also pay 7, tap this thing, and copy an instant sorcery spell you control and choose new targets for it. This thing's nuts. Hell yeah, I'd run this thing in a Storm deck. I would run this thing in a Storm deck all day. This thing, it just makes your Storms more impactful. It adds an extra cast to Storm's damage trigger by itself, and also you can activate it to get Storms off if Storm gets removed. I imagine Storm as like a CDH commander, a very fast, very combo-y kind of style, and this thing's gonna draw removal. So when I think of like our commander getting removal, one of my favorite ways to protect it is this thing called a Heroic Intervention. Heroic Intervention isn't going to help us storm off and win the game, but it is going to save Storm from dying. This thing is a $17 2-mana mono green instant. It says permanents you control gain Hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Storm is going to be targeted, especially the first time we win with Storm, and once our opponents know what Storm do, Storm's going to get got, and we need some ways to protect Storm, in my personal opinion. And I think Heroic Intervention is a great way to do that. Seething Song, suggested by Frost Ace. And yeah, and then we're gonna see. Alright, so Seething Song is a 3-mana mono red instant. It says add 5 red to your mana pool. This thing reminds me of Demonic Tutor. I've seen this thing a few times. It is a great Storm card. It is a hell yeah, you gotta include this thing. This is a $6 common, y'all. If that don't tell you it's good, it's good. I often see this thing in Storm builds. I normally see Storm builds inside of red and in blue, and it's normally got this thing because it's like a red Dark Ritual, and it helps you get the mana to pull off your combo and end the game. This thing's cool. I like it. I don't like that it's a $6 common. I don't like that $6 commons exist, but that's cool. Oh, a Gift of the Viper! Apple Hardcore says a Gift of the Viper. If Gift of the Viper is that MH3 card, I really like it. Yeah, this thing's rad. Someone suggested this the other day for one of our, I think it was loot. I think we were building loot and someone suggested this thing. This is a 1 mana mono green instant that came out in MH3. It's 50 cents and you put a +1/+1 a reach counter and a death touch counter on target creature and you untap it. This thing's amazing. I love this thing. I am about to go through my bulk and pull out all of these. I hope I can grab a foil one. This thing has so much value for a 1 mana instant. Normally in a 1 mana instant in green, you're just giving something like hexproof or death touch until end of turn. This thing makes your creature bigger, it gives it reach so it can block flyers, it also gives it death touch, and it untaps it. It does so much for 1 mana. So let's paint a picture. The way, I don't imagine going off in a Storm deck, unless we want to make Storm huge. That could be crazy. But the way I imagine using this in a Commander game, under normal circumstances, is we wait, we tap out, we swing out, and we look vulnerable. We just sit there looking all vulnerable, like, ooh, woo, don't attack me. And then when they do, we cast this thing, we untap a spicy blocker, we make it a little bit bigger, we give it reach in case it's a dragon or something that flies, and we give it death touch. All for a singular green mana. This thing's amazing. Also, the art is rad. Recon over on Twitch suggests an Atarka's Command. Atarka's Command, I assume it's green. Atarka's Command is a Gruul 2 mana instant that came out. Actually, I'm not sure where this came out. It says your opponents can't gain life, or it deals 3 damage to each opponent, or you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Creatures you control gain +1/+1 reach until end of turn. That's cool. That +1/+1 reach can work kind of a similar way in that last card, the Viper card we just saw. This thing's cool. Where the hell is this thing from? I want to say it's from Dragons of Tarkir, but I'm not positive. This thing's cool. It's a 2 mana instant, and if we storm off with it, we can deal 3 damage to each opponent and just win the game with this card, right? So we got 2 mana. It's an instant speed, so we can do it whenever the hell we want to, preferably in our second main phase after we get Storm's trigger to go off, so we can copy it a crap ton of times. So if we can copy this like 11 times from no, we need more than 11. Well, that's only if life totals are high. And Storm needs to deal damage, so they're not going to be at 40. This is cool. We can use this to win the game, we can use it to ramp, and we can use it to make things big and block with stuff until end of turn. I like it. It's viable. It's only $2. Cool suggestion, Recon. Very cool. Alright, hello everybody. I am BGM. I am a video editor and a streamer, and on lives, we do live deck building. Tonight, we are building Storm Force of Nature. She came out in the Marvel Secret Lair, and she is a Teamer Storm deck. And she cares about she cares about instants and sorceries. When she deals combat damage, the next instant and sorcery we cast has Storm, meaning that we get free copies off of it. And wouldn't it just be silly and goofy and fun to storm off on a Cultivate? Just grab all the basics out of our deck, fill our hands, fill our board with little tap lands. This would be cool. Even if we, like, on turn 5, because she ain't got haste, unless we got a way to give her haste. So on turn 5 is when we're going to be typically doubling things out, unless we ramp super hard. This thing's cool. You can run all the instants and sorceries you want. Brain Freeze. What the heck is a Brain Freeze? I feel like I've died to a Brain Freeze before. Brain Freeze is another good shout for Storm. Yeah, what the heck is this? Target player builds 3 cards. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. This is a great candidate for a Storm. Okay, so someone please correct me if I'm wrong. So Storm deals combat damage. She gives the next instant or sorcery cast Storm, right? And we make copies. If the copies already have Storm, do we just get somebody? I think we just get somebody with this thing. Or maybe the whole table. These themselves have Storm. Maybe Storm is a cast trigger. Maybe Storm's a cast trigger. I'm not positive. Do the copies have Storm themselves? Amphibian Downpour. Amphibian Downpour. Amphibian Downpour. Sounds like an instant. Nope, it's an aura. It's a 3 mana blue aura. It says Flash Storm. When you cast a spell, copy it for each spell you've cast this turn. Enchanted creature is a frog and loses all abilities and is a 1/1. I like that, actually. In Commander especially, cards like Darksteel Mutation or like a Song of the Dryad, things that turn creatures into shittier creatures, like this here Amphibian Downpour, are really, really good because it allows you to turn off your opponent's commanders. Side note, if you're a casual player, they might be poopy. They might get poopy with you if you turn off your commander with this thing. But, you know, it's really cool. It's really impactful. It's a great piece of removal. This thing fucking has Storm, though. So this thing's going to be turning off everybody's commander. This thing's interesting. The only thing I feel like a little bit bummed about is that it's an aura instead of an instant or sorcery. If it was an instant or sorcery, we could go off with Storm, but this thing has Storm all by itself. And I'm kind of glad it's not an instant or sorcery because it would function like a board wipe. Everything's suddenly a frog. This thing's cool, though. The copies of Brain Freeze don't trigger, otherwise it infinites itself. Yeah, I was kind of, Ben Camp, you're right. Thank you. That would have been sick. Storm Catch Mentor. Apple Hardcore on TikTok suggests a Storm Catch Mentor. Storm Catch Mentor. Hey everybody, I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer, and on lives we do live deck building. We are doing Teamer Storm tonight with Storm Force of Nature as our commander. If you have a suggestion to put in this thing, put it in the comments. If you see your card over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list, and y'all can check that out via the link tree. And if you want to vote on the rest of the week's commanders for live deck building, you can head into the Bigger Gayer Discord and vote there. Thank you for hanging out with me, and thank you for the 30 likes. This is Stormcatch Mentor, and this Otter Wizard 1/1 came out in Bloomborough. It's got haste. It has prowess, which means that whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it gets a little bit bigger until end of turn. It says that instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast. This thing's great. There are so many things that say that instants and sorceries are 1 less to cast. This thing is a creature. It's got prowess. So when we're storming off with, or wait, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, do Storm. So if you copy a bunch of stuff with Storm, does it trigger prowess? That would be cool to know. If someone in the comments could let me know, that would be amazing. Atali, Austin S wants us to run Atali. Which Atali, Austin? I would suggest this Atali because this Atali's great. This Atali flips into a thing that's called like a Blightsteel Colossus. We'll talk about that in a minute. The front side is a 7-mana mono red dinosaur. It's got trample and it's a 7/7. And when it enters the battlefield, each player, including you get a free spell off this dinosaur too. You exile cards off the top until you hit a spell. You cast a spell for free, and you get 1 spell off everybody's library. So you hit this thing, enters the battlefield, and you get 4 free spells. It's amazing. That alone, honestly, ETB 4 free spells. But let's talk about it. We can pay 10 mana or 9 mana and 2 life, and we flip it into this thing called Blightsteel Colossus. It's a trampling, indestructible 11/11 with this thing called Infect. It doesn't have Infect, but it almost does. Whenever Atali Primal Sickness deals combat damage to a player, that player gets that many poison counters. If you are blissfully unaware or new to Commander, poison is a way to win the game after you deal like 10-ish damage or give your opponent 10 poison counters. This thing's an 11/11 with trample, which means that if it swings on an open board, that player loses. That's all that means. This thing's crazy though. It's 16 bucks. It came out in March of the Machines. It's the Atali that I would run. Yeah. So prowess doesn't trigger off the storm triggers. Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate you for clearing that up for me. Gooby Goofer says a Bria Riptide. Bria Riptide. Bria Riptide is like the Otter commander. It's like the face Otter commander. It's a 4-mana Otter Rogue. Itself is a 3/3. It's got prowess. Prowess doesn't trigger off our storm copies. And other creatures you control got prowess. That's super interesting. So the way that I imagine we play our storm deck is we cast a couple things in our first main phase so that we can have a bigger storm trigger after we hit with storm in our second main phase. This thing gives other creatures prowess, so when we cast spells in our first main phase, storm gets a little bit bigger for each spell when Bria's on the battlefield. Your control can't be blocked. 10 out of 10, would play, would recommend. This thing will make storm unblockable. Storm already has a little bit of evasion in the form of flying, but this thing just makes it unblockable. It makes storm a little bit bigger too. This thing's rad. Excellent suggestion. Thank you very much for the follow, Ben Camp. I appreciate it. Rainbow Pubster suggests a Psychotic Rage. The heck is a Psychotic Rage? Psychotic Rage. Or Psionic Rage. P-S-Y-C-H-O-T-I-C. Psychotic Fury! Okay, Psychotic Fury is a 2-mana mono red spell. It's $1. It says a target multicolored creature gains double strike until end of turn, but the real juicy bit is that draw a card. That's very cool. So, you know, I feel like this works both ways in Storm. We want to be casting stuff before Storm gets her damage trigger. That way we have more impactful Storm off effects. This thing can give Storm double strike, which is very cool, because we do need to deal combat damage with Storm, but I don't think that's the primary purpose for this thing. I think we're really running this thing for that 2 mana draw card. If we cast this thing after Storm hits, we're going to be drawing multiple cards. If we have a crazy Storm off effect, we're going to draw a crap ton of cards off this. It's also 2 mana at instant speed, and that's great too. Double strike also okay, wait, excuse me, I was wrong. Who said that? Apple Hardcore, please. Yes, Apple Hardcore, thank you very much for hanging out. That's an excellent point. I actually learned about this ruling, and I've been playing for like 9 years. I learned about this ruling like in December. So double strike actually causes triggered abilities that you need to deal damage. Double strike causes those abilities to trigger additional times. So this thing, you cast in your first main phase, give Storm double strike, you double your Storm triggers, which means that you're gonna give it 2 instances of Storm the next spell you cast in your second main phase. Thank you, Apple Hardcore, I appreciate you. That's a great thing to point out, thank you. If you're running extra combats, it gets real spicy. Ben Camp says that Fury would be amazing as a follow-up to an extra. It sure would be an extra, yeah. You get Storm if she, yeah, you get Storm. Yeah, Puffster, you get Storm. Ooh, Gitaxian Probe. I like Gitaxian Probe. People tell me Gitaxian Probe isn't good, and I'm like, okay, but I like it. Gitaxian Probe is like, it's either 2 life or it's 1 blue mana. It's a sorcery. You look at target player's hand. You don't do anything with the stuff in their hand. You just get to look at it. And you also draw yourself a card. I like this thing. I like this thing a lot. I run it in my Locust God deck. If you're copying it and making a bunch of copies, you're going to draw a crap ton of cards, and you can see what's in your opponent's decks. I imagine, excuse me, not your opponent's decks, you get to see what's in their hands. This thing, I feel like, has some CEDH viability, says a non-CEDH player. I feel like Storm really shines in CEDH, and I feel like that's where the Storm off strategy, like the strategy of, not our Commander Storm, but like the Commander strategy of Storm shines is in CEDH. I like Gitaxian Probe. I like that it's a $5 common. David G, good to see you. You say a Manamorphose. A Manamorphose. 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 Oh, this thing's got a rad art. Okay, we got a 2 mana instant. Add 2 mana in any combination of colors, draw a card. This thing's amazing, actually. This thing's just wonderful. So it's kind of free. You add 2 mana in any combo of colors, so you can make blue mana with it. That's exciting. You also draw cards. Also, if you're storming off, you're going to draw a crap ton of cards, and you're going to make a crap ton of mana off of this thing. This thing's really good. This thing's really good. $5 $6 uncommon. Also, the art's a vibe. I like that the art kind of references the rules. Because the guy, he's like, you can see there's green, there's blue, there's white, there's black, there's all the kinds of mana in his fist. It makes any combo of colors, you draw a card. I like this. This feels like a very cohesive card design. I like the split frame on it. I like this little piece of cardboard. This one's cool. Alright. Yeah, it comes in the Storm Lair. Oh wait, it comes in the Storm Secret Lair. I didn't know that. Hey, Tap and Sackett, good to see you. Hey, everybody, if you would please check out my friend Tap and Sackett. He makes really good MTG content. He released a good edit, and he puts in the effort for his free samples on TikTok Shop. And I personally appreciate that you do that, Tap and Sackett. Yeah. It's essential in a modern story. It sure is essential. Song of Creation. Yeah, Song of Creation's a rad suggestion. I built Animar recently, and I took this thing out immediately. This is a 4-mana Teamer enchantment. It says that you may play an additional land of each of your turns, and whenever you cast a spell, you get to draw 2 cards. But at your end step, you gotta discard your hand. This thing is very cool for Storm off decks. I feel like we might be really effing ourselves in a Storm deck because we want to have cards in our hand. If we hit an untap and we have no cards in hand and we draw a land, we're gonna have a bad time, y'all. This thing, I feel like, really shines in a commander called Flubs. Flubs was the buy-a-box promo in the Bloomborough expansion from last year. He's $1, he's 3 mana, he's in our colors. He's a 0/5, and he's a lot like Song of Creation, except a creature. Whenever you play an additional land, you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever you play a land or cast a spell, if you have no cards in your hand, you draw a card, but if you got cards in your hand, you have to discard a card, even for playing lands. Flubs, when I think like Teamer, CDH, Storm off, I think Flubs. All right. Growth Spiral. Growth Spiral. David J suggested Growth Spiral. Growth Spiral is rad. Growth Spiral is a 2-mana Simic instant. It says that you draw a card and you plop a land from your hand onto the battlefield at instant speed. I like the one with the little the Simic watermark. I like the fancy treatments. This thing's cool. It's only 50 cents. It came out in Ravnica Allegiance. Also, the art is a vibe. This thing's cool. Yeah, it's great. It's also it's also like really affordable. It's a 50-cent common. It draws you a card, which I feel like is the real reason we're running this thing. Slamming lands onto the battlefield is cool and all, but like when you're storming off, you need to draw a crap ton of cards, you need to make a crap ton of mana, and you need a way to end the game with your crap ton of cards and mana. This thing will let you draw a crap ton of cards, and because you're putting the lands onto the battlefield. Oh shit. No, they're not tapped. You put the lands from your hand onto the battlefield untapped. So if you have a bunch of basics, this thing is a lot better now that it took me a sec. Yeah, this thing's great. This thing could lead you to winning the game. Because you're going to be drawing a crap ton of cards, you can make a crap ton of mana because you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you got a lot of basics or lands that enter untapped, you're going to be making mana with this thing. This thing's amazing. I would definitely run this in a Storm deck. Great suggestion. Thank you, David. Fractured Realm! Frost Ace, friend of the channel, says a Fractured Realm. Fractured Realm. Ooh, this thing, okay, so we got a Duskmourn, we got a little room enchantment. The first stop, the 3-mana enchantment size, says that when you unlock this door, you create a copy that's a copy of target creature you control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other types. Very cool. So we saw that little otter that makes instants and sorceries cost 1 less. I think we saw a couple blue dorks that tap for mana. We could make some copies with this side. And then on the 7-mana side, if a triggered ability of a permanent you control would trigger, it triggers an additional time. That's why we're running this thing. We want additional triggers, because Storm's combat deal damage ability is a triggered ability. And if we can get multiple Storms, or excuse me, when we cast an instant, after we have multiple triggers of this ability resolve, it's going to get multiple instances of Storm. So instead of getting cast equal to the amount of spells you've cast this turn, you're going to do that multiple times. It's going to be coconuts. This thing's cool. I feel like the 7-mana enchantment side of this thing is a way for us to win, kind of. Also, Double Strike is another great way to double up Storm's triggers, because triggers that say that when you deal damage, you get the effect, Double Strike causes them to deal damage twice, which is really upsetting for me. And I only just learned that, like, last year. I've been playing for a while. Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Let's talk about Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Tasha's Hideous Laughter. She's a dragon, and she's very funny. She's a D&D character. This might be Baldur's Gate. I mean, they're both D&D. Okay, no, this is D&D. Tasha's Hideous Laughter is a 3-mana mono-blue sorcery that says that each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with total mana value 20 or more. Yikes on trikes. Okay, this thing is a way to end the game. Let's talk about it. So, my decks, typically, I build a lot of decks. I actually started live deck building because sometimes I would just hang out and build a deck and take it apart before even playing it. And, this thing's crazy, y'all. Most of my decks and most of the spells in my decks and the way that I build is hanging around 3 mana or 4 mana. And this thing's going to get rid of a bunch of cards. Not to mention all the lands it's going to hit which don't have any mana value. This thing's insane. And if you copy this like 3 or 4 times, I feel like you can just get rid of somebody's deck just outright with this thing. Especially one of mine, because I like to build with like lower CMC values that synergize really hard. This thing's dangerous. That's probably why this thing's $8. I'm not gonna lie, I have one of these things, it sits in a binder, and I'm like, wow, that thing's gotta be like 5 cents, because like, if you're not copying it, it doesn't do a whole lot. But if you're copying it, you're just getting rid of someone's library. And it's not like it's putting it in their graveyard either, you're exiling the cards. Stormcatch Mentor, yeah, Stormcatch Mentor. When I mentioned that otter that makes instants and sorceries one less to cast for that, room enchantment, I was talking about this thing. This is a 50-cent little otter. It's got prowess, it's got haste, and instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. reducing the casting cost of our instants and sorceries is a great way to lean further into storming off with Storm. Like, this thing is a lot more valuable than just like a 2-mana mana rock that taps and produces a singular mana, because this thing can produce multiple mana for multiple spells. Dang it, your Farseek video came up again. Rojira, thank you very much for watching my very silly videos. I appreciate it. Mana Geyser is like, it's, oh, I love this thing. I have a Saruman of the White Hand non-creature spell deck, and I love this thing. I run this in there. It's a 5-mana, $5 red sorcery, and in a multiplayer game of Commander, it makes a crap ton of mana, because it says that you make a red mana for each tapped land your opponents control. And if you got 3 opponents, and if you're later in the game, you're going to be making like at least 10 mana easy off your Mana Geyser. I love this thing. This thing is so good. I use it to cast like a gigantic Torment of Hailfire, and that's how I use my Mana Geyser. But if you're storming off, this thing's going to make you all the mana you need to win a game. You can maybe like a Crackle with Power. Have we seen Crackle with Power yet? Crackle with Power is like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't like losing to Crackle with Power, but I surely do lose to Crackle with Power. This thing, you put all the mana you can into this thing. It deals 5 times X damage to each of up to 5 targets. Usually 3 of the targets are players. This thing is $5. This is a reprint from Thunder Junction. The original printing was in Strixhaven. This thing's very cool, though. Very cool. Great way to win with Storm if you have a crap ton of mana. Archmage Emeritus. Archmage Emeritus. Archmage Emeritus is a 4-mana, $6 human wizard from Strixhaven. It says whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you draw yourself a card. This thing's amazing. It draws you a crap ton of cards, and it kind of just fixes you. It draws you all the cards you need to storm off, kind of all by itself, because Storm's storming ability are copies. When you get the copies, you're gonna draw cards off this thing. It's very cool. Seed Time. What the heck is Seed Time? Seed Time is in my Storm deck. It's great punish for blue interaction. The heck is Seed Time? Seed Time is a $5 2-mana green instant and says cast the spell only during your own turn, and you take another turn after this one, and if an opponent casts a blue spell this turn. What the f is this? I have never seen this thing before in my life. Why is it 2 mana? Why is it an extra turn? What the hell is this? Okay. The art's very cool. I'm glad it got a reprint, because I imagine this thing must have been expensive once upon a time. This thing is nuts, though. I'm not a CDH person whatsoever. That's not a secret. This thing feels like a very CDH card to me. You see a lot of blue in CDH because countering somebody's spell is just the best way to stop them from winning a game. This thing punishes counter spells, but you do got to be countered, or they do have to cast something blue before you on your turn, I might add. You know what? God, you people playing CDH, I don't know. That's crazy. That's a crazy-ass card, yo. Throes of Chaos. Rainbow Pupster says a Throes of Chaos is funny. Yeah, let's look at something funny after that extra turn spell. Let's look at Throes of Chaos. Throes of Chaos is a 4-mana red sorcery with Cascade. And Retrace. Okay. So Cascade means that when you cast this 4-drop, you're going to exile cards off the top of your library until you hit a spell with CMC 3 or less. And you may cast it for free. If you choose not to, it gets exiled forever. Retrace means that you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its additional costs, which is 4 mana. So this thing's cool. It gets you a Cascade trigger for 3. So it gets you a free 3-drop spell from your deck, which is cool, especially if you are storming off with Throes of Chaos. Actually, storming off with Throes of Chaos is so silly and janky and fun, actually. It doesn't feel very CDH to me, but it's very cool because when you get multiple instances of Cascade, you're casting the stuff with the Cascade trigger. So it does count towards your cast cost and your storm count. And if you Cascade off by storming off this thing with Storm, tonight's live is a tongue twister, y'all. Yeah, this thing's crazy. You just cast all your free cantrip spells out of your library. This thing's very cool. Also, being able to retrace it on a later turn, that's a lot of value. That's very cool to me. I would run this in my Storm deck all day. This thing is very cool. So you cast it in your second main phase. You Storm off with it, off Storm's trigger. You Cascade, and you cast a crap ton more spells. And then on your following turn, if Storm lives, you hit with Storm again, and then you use the Retrace ability to cast it from your graveyard, getting even more Cascade triggers. Or, another way we could do this is we can cast it in our first main phase, and because it has Cascade, it's going to give you a Storm count of at least 2 going into combat with Storm. This thing's nuts, actually. This thing's great for Storm. Copy doesn't trigger Cascade. The copies don't trigger Cascade? That's a bummer. When you cast this... Oh, that's a bummer. So the copies don't trigger well, bummer. Storm Warp. What the heck is Storm Warp, tap and sack it? Storm Warp. Storm Warp. Storm Warp World. Storm Warp World. Okay, the card's called Warp World. Warp World. My spider sense is tingling. I feel like I've lost to Warp World before. I don't remember what Warp World does, but I got that itch in my brain that I've lost to this card before. Alright, Warp World is a 8-mana red sorcery. It is $1.50. It says that each player shuffles all permanents he or she owns into her library, then reveals that many cards on top of their library. Each player puts all artifact, creature, land cards revealed this way onto this way into play, then puts all enchantments revealed this way into play, and then puts all rest on the bottom. Okay, this thing's cool. This thing's a little bit wordy for me. It could have just said permanents, but I guess it doesn't hit planeswalkers. It doesn't hit battles. So there's that. But this, okay, so if we storm off with this thing, we're just gonna be showing everybody our decks. Everybody's just gonna be, this is nuts. Okay. If you want to spend 40 minutes and not end the game, storm off Warp World, right? It's player push all. Okay. Weird. It's very strange. It's very chaotic. I imagine it goes in a chaos deck. Give Warp World Storm is what I meant. Let's shuffle for an hour. Yeah, let's just play with our decks in front of each other. Well, Dika, Fractal Theorist. Fractal Theorist. Dika, Fractal Theorist is a 5-mana blue legendary human wizard 3/3. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, and you put X counters on it where X is a spell's mana value. 10 out of 10. This feels like a great little lieutenant or second commander for this deck. You're just going to be making tokens, and tokens are great blockers. Do the fractals fly? No, the fractals don't fly. I always get so confused about if the fractal creatures fly, because in every art with fractal creatures, there's a flying creature. You can also pay for and target creature token can't be blocked this turn. That's spicy. I like it. It's only... Oh, wait, this thing's $5. Nope, $6. This thing's good, actually. Yeah, so we cast stuff, we copy stuff. We're going to be making fractals off the copies, because storming trigger. It's just a miserable time. Warp World is a beautiful way not to... Warp World is beautiful. Why not give it Storm? Thank you, Turtle. The Otter Raw. Yeah, let's talk about Raw. Let's pull up Otter Raw. Otter Raw. It's really funny that they made Raw an otter, because in gay Pokemon terms, he is an otter. If someone has this, if someone knows the full name of the Otter Raw card, I would appreciate it. There are so many Raw cards in MTG, we'd be scrolling for a while. Aren't copies not cast? Yes, I believe so. And not, it's if it says you may copy the spell, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost, that copy is cast. So it's tricksy. Storm feels like a CEDH commander to me. If we were feeling particularly, oh god, Scrambleverse. God, I hate Scrambleverse. Frost Ace, you are dead on with being evil. This is Scrambleverse. It's an 8-mana sorcery. If we want to be silly about it, we'll talk about it as if we're giving it Storm. For each non-land permanent, choose a player at random, then that player... Oh my god. I hate this. God, we're gonna be here forever. Okay, don't give Scramble versus Storm, please. Please never give Scramble versus Storm. Please never give Warp World Storm either while we're talking about it. Thank you so much, Thaneverse, for the follow. I really appreciate it. I am Bigger Gayer Magic. I'm a video editor and streamer, and on lives, we do live deck building. We are doing Storm Force of Nature as our commander tonight. If you have a suggestion for our Storm deck, please put it in the comments. If you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list, and y'all can check out the Moxfield deck list and all the other cards that people suggested for Storm Force of Nature on my link tree. There's the Moxfield link on my link tree. And if you want to vote on the rest of the week's live deck building commanders, you can head to the Bigger Gayer Discord and vote in the commander, the live deck building channel on the Discord. Thanks for hanging out with me. This is Raw Crackling Wit. He's gay, he's an otter, and he's an otter. He came out in Bloomborough. He enters with 4 loyalty. He says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you'll put a loyalty counter on your otter. And this thing has 3 abilities, +1, you make a little otter with prowess, or you -3, you draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards, or you can -10, draw 3 cards, you get an emblem with instant sorcery spells you cast have Storm. So this thing's cool. If we're leaning into like a casual commander space with Storm, I would play this thing. When I imagine Storm, and when I feel like most Storm Force of Nature builds lean into CDH, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like, well, actually maybe it does. I don't know. It's that triggered ability at the top. Because if we Storm off, whenever you cast, well, some Storm copies don't give you cast triggers. I don't know. It's confusing for me. I am out of my element. This feels like a CDH commander and a Storm commander. I have never once built a Storm strategy deck. Bonus round would be fun for Storm. Benjamin says a bonus round. What the heck is a bonus round? Bonus round, is this from Fallout? Nope, it's not. It's from Battle Bond. I loved Battle Bond. This is a $5, 3 mana red sorcery, and then until end of turn, whenever a player to cast an instant or sorcery spell, that player copies it, and they may choose new targets for the copy. 10 out of 10 would. This thing's amazing. Okay. So like, let's say we cast in our second main phase. We give it Storm. And let's say we only do it twice, right? Like, let's say it's the first spell this turn. And when we cast another spell, if we get 2 of these to go off, we're going to copy it twice for a total of 3. I like that a lot. I'm only going to talk about it in the way of 2, because if there's more, I'm going to get too confused. This thing's very cool, though. It's $5. It came out in Battle Bond. The art's very rad. Thank you very much for the follow, Namule Jamie. I appreciate it. I'm BGM. I use green screen effects and other graphics to make silly little Magic the Gathering videos. And on lives, we do live deck building. We are talking about Storm Force of Nature, and if you want to see all the cards that the viewers have suggested for a Storm Force of Nature deck, you can check it out in the Moxfield link on the profile. This is Galazeth Prismari, suggested by Boaxon over on Twitch. Thank you, Boaxon. This is a 4 mana Elder Dragon. It's a 3/4, it flies, and when this thing enters the battlefield, you make yourself a treasure, and artifacts you control tap for mana of any color. But the mana from these artifacts can only be used for instants and sorceries. This thing's cool. It's kind of a stormy commander in and of itself, but it's like a treasure storm. This thing's $6. It came out in Strixhaven. It's aggressively costed at 4 mana, a lot like Storm. It itself flies. It has the same. So if you need to compare Storm for lore purposes, she is as powerful as a dragon, except she's also vigilant. And that's, yeah, this thing's cool. Being able to make mana off your treasures without sacrificing them is rad. Funny card, flick a coin, otherwise known as Take My Pennies. Take My Pennies? Take My Pennies is a card? If Take My Pennies is a card, I'm gonna be flabbergasted. Okay, Take My Pennies unfortunately did not come up. Goblin Electromancer though, let's talk about a Goblin Electromancer. Goblin Electromancer is a... Oh, snippety snaps. We lost connection. I'm sorry for the connectivity issues, guys. Goblin Electromancer. It's a... Not Simic. That's Izzet colors. It's an Izzet colored goblin, and it says that instant sorcery spells you cost 1 less to cast. This thing, unfortunately, has been classed out by a Bloomborough card, but if I tell you what, if I'm running CDH strategies and I want to make a crap ton of mana, I run both. This thing is just a like vanilla goblin wizard 2/2, instant sorcery is called 1 less. Now we also have this thing called a Tide Catcher. Tide Catcher is an otter, and he catches things. Where it's like a Riptide Catcher? Riptide Catcher. Nope, that's the otter. Okay, well, there's another otter. It's a common, and it makes instants and sorceries one less to cast. Redundancy is great. I'm an advocate for Chef's Kiss as protection from spell. The heck is Chef's Kiss? Chef's Kiss? Chef's Kiss. Okay, we got a Chef's Kiss. It's a 3-mana red instant. It's 60 cents. Gain control of target spell that targets only a single permanent or player. Copy it. Then reselect targets at random for the spell in the copy. The new targets can't be you or permanents you control. This thing's amazing, actually. What were you suggesting? In what context? I'm an advocate for Chef's Kiss as a protection spell for Storm. Thank you, Hunter Steed. That's a cool suggestion. This thing's so silly, y'all. Gain control of target spell that targets only a single permanent or player. Copy that spell. Reselect it. This thing's very great. So if people are trying to interact with Storm, I talked about heroic intervention earlier. People are gotta get rid of Storm. If Storm is the primary way, we're copying our spells. People are going to target her. People are going to remove her. And eventually she's going to get too expensive to cast because she already starts at 4 mana. This thing is a way to stop things that are spot removing Storm. And it will spot remove other things. And it will spot remove multiple things. Also, if you can copy it, that is even sillier. That is even sillier if you can copy this thing. I like it a lot, actually. I like that it's 60 cents, too. I like it. I feel like that's really fun in Commander. Even in Casual Commander, that feels really fun. My fave Commander deck has 50 rat colonies with an exquisite blood wind gun and a ton of tutors. I was actually thinking about making a silly little green screen video, kind of poking fun at rat players. Because, you know, there's actually quite a few rat decks going around. We got Rat Colony, we got Relentless Rats, we got that Toxic Rat Commander, we got that Nizumi thing. There's a lot of rats going around, and there are multiple rat decks in my play group now, and they're all good. Rat decks are hardcore, y'all. Alright, this is Veyran, Voice of Duality. He is the box commander of the Izzet Strixhaven Precon. He's $9, and he says whenever you cast a copy an instant or sorcery spell, this thing gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Thank you very much, Heroic Vandal, for the follow. I appreciate it. And thank you guys for the 250 likes tonight. If you are casting or copying an instant or sorcery spell causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. That thing's very cool. So we saw like this Archmage Emeritus. We saw a ton of Strixhaven cards that have this keyworded triggered ability, keyworded trigger, Magecraft. This thing causes your Magecraft triggers to trigger additional times. This thing's very cool. Notable among cards with Magecraft we saw was this Archmage Emeritus. Archmage Emeritus. It's got Magecraft, and it says whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. So if we run that Vehan thing, it's going to double up those triggers and draw us enough cards to win the game outright. Stitch in Time! Stitch in Time! Stitch in Time! Stitch in Time? Stitch in Time. Stitch in Time is the most Doctor Who sounding ass card. Stitch in Time. Can I please get... Oh, I'm not putting a second T. I'm a dumbass. My bad, Frost H. Stitch in Time. It's not a Doctor Who card. I am absolutely shooketh. Alright, this is a little Izzet sorcery. It says flip a coin. If you win the flip, you get an extra turn. Okay. So, you know, it's weird for me to talk about cards within a CDH contest. I'm not a CDH player, but I definitely feel like Storm really lends herself to a CDH strategy. This thing... I would not play in Casual Commander. Well, maybe I would. I probably wouldn't play it. I don't like extra turn spells on principle. But I'm not going to moralize, and I'm not going to tell you how to play it. That's not what the show's about. This thing, though, could be very silly if we copy it. You know what I imagine the most joyous outcome of running this thing in a Storm deck could be? Is that we copy it like 2 or 3 times, and we lose all the coin flips. How silly would that be? How funny would that be? Because if we win the coin flips, we're gonna win the game off this card, y'all. This thing's great. Great in a CDH strategy. Even getting 1 extra turn, wonderful. Thank you for the suggestion. Let's talk about a Noxious Revival. R1 says a Noxious Revival. Noxious Revival is a green instant. It's 1 mana, a single green mana, or 2 life because of the Phyrexian mana pip. Instant, put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. Yo, okay. This thing's great, actually. I would run this thing outside of Storm. This thing's great, actually. So we talked about storming off, right? So in a Storm deck, especially in the CDA strategy, this thing I don't feel like hangs in Casual Commander. I feel like putting it in Casual Commander makes it bad. Because the way you want to win with this thing, you want to win all at once, right? And if you put some valuable combo pieces in the graveyard, this thing can put them on top. And I'm not even worried about it putting the card on top of the library instead of into your hand, because we have seen so many card draw effects. And if we're storming off with card draw, we are going to be able to draw the card that we tutor from the graveyard with this thing. This thing feels great. If we need like something that deals damage to really end the game, because you need 3 things when you're storming off to end the game. You need a crap ton of mana, you need a crap ton of card draw, and you need a way to clear the game. If your way to clear the game is in the graveyard and you got this thing, you can put it back on top of your deck and draw it out. And I like this thing a lot, actually. Also, it has a flexible mana cost. So if you are out of mana, you can cast it for Phyrexian. This thing's great, actually. I see why this uncommon is $8. This thing's great, actually. Vegeta636 says Full Throttle. Full Throttle is a brand of energy drinks, and it makes my chest feel weird. Full Throttle is coming out in Aether Drift. It's a 6-mana mono red sorcery. After this main phase, there are two additional combat phases. At the beginning of each combat this turn, untap all creatures that attacked this turn. You know what? I kind of like this. I kind of like it, actually. The art's rad in and of itself. Here, let me do it this way so you guys can read the card. This is Loot. Loot is the newest mascot of Magic the Gathering. It's our Pikachu. We are trying to just merchandise the fuck out of this little furball. He's got deck boxes. He's got goggles now. He's cool. I don't know. To tell you the truth, I don't really give a crap about Loot. But he is very cute. But what I do give a crap about is homosexuals. And Chandra's bi, so she counts. This thing's coming out on Aether Drift. It's already $6. It gives you 2 additional combat phases for 6 mana as a red sorcery. Very cool. Holy sh! Thank you guys for the 2,000 likes. That is a man. I blinked and you guys took it from like 250 to 2,000. Y'all can chill. Y'all can chill. Thank you so much for tapping the screen for me. But let's chill. Thank you for doing that, guys. I appreciate it. I love that it made a deck of it. It doesn't give additional. Yeah, it doesn't give additional. Electrickery. Electrickery? Frostace says electrickery. Electrickery. Electrickery is a 1-mana red mono instant. It says it deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control. But if you cast it for its overload's cost, it deals 1 damage many times. Or no, it deals 1 damage to each creature you don't control, instead of just 1. So, if we storm off with Electro Trickery, it's kind of going to be like a Blasphemous Act, I feel like. I feel like this is a 1-mana Blasphemous Act all the time in a Storm deck. Yeah, I mean, it might not hit large, big, thick, dumpy creatures, but this thing will definitely kill the little things. It'll hit Lotho. It'll kill Atraxa. I kind of like it. I kind of like it. Also, the art, the goggles on the fairy in the art are very silly to me. I kind of like it. I vibe. I also like the watermark in the text box. Oh, Lost in Sound. Lost in Sound. That is an excellent username. Great username, Lost in Sound. That is so cool. Lost in Sound is cooler than all of us, and he wants us to play Reality Chip. Reality Chip is rad. It came out in the Neon Genesis Kamigawa block. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact creature, equipment jellyfish. Look how tiny the font is on the type line. It says you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and as long as the Reality Chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library, and you can equip it for 3. This thing's great. It's a great way to get card advantage that isn't card draw. When we're storming off, having the ability to look at the top card of our library is really useful, because if we run out of cards and we can cast the cards off the top, that's going to be great. Storm herself, we are always going to have a creature because we need Storm to kind of win, because we are going off with storming triggers. We can just plop this thing on Storm. I like it. Good little piece of card advantage on the Reality Chip. Reality Chip, excuse me. I want your opinion on Exquisite Blood. Okay, so unfortunately, Exquisite Blood's outside of our color identity. I'm sure everyone here who plays Commander knows what Exquisite Blood is. It's the 5-mana black enchantment that says that if an opponent would lose life, we gain that life. Exquisite Blood is almost exclusively talked about in the context of its combo piece, Sanguine Bond, which is like Exquisite Blood, except it says whenever we gain life, target opponent loses life. Those two effects together end a game as soon as we get a life gain trigger. To tell you the truth, I actually played against someone running Exquisite Blood for the first time that they didn't run Sanguine Bond. And Exquisite Blood, even if you just have it as a card in the deck in a game of Commander, is crazy good, y'all. It is so good. It gains you a ton of life. Exquisite Blood, even without the context of the combo pieces, is a really good card. But our suggestion is this Fangs of Colonia. It's a 2-mana green sorcery. It says put a +1/+1 on target creature you control, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature that had a +1/+1 counter put on it this way. And we can overload it for 6. I don't imagine we're ever going to overload this thing. We saw maybe 2 other creatures that weren't Storm in this whole deck. It was a Goblin Electromancer and some Otter that makes instants and sorceries cost 1 less, and that's the same thing Goblin Electromancer does. But this thing could be silly, because it's not going to win us the game, but it is going to make Storm very scary. It's going to put a silly amount of counters on Storm. And I feel like that could be a win con in and of itself. Normally, I would think that Storm is like storming trigger is how we're going to win the game, and we're going to make a bunch of copies, and we're going to have the biggest, splashiest spell. But this thing could just make Storm bigger, and on the following turn, you just beat face with your Flying Storm. This thing's cool. Modern Horizons 3 had so many great cards in it. I think for like singles and just Commander viable cards, Modern Horizons 3 was probably the best set for me personally last year. Talrand. Okay, let's talk about Talrand the Sky Summoner. We can't talk about storming off in blue without talking about Talrand. Talrand is a legendary 4-drop Merfolk Wizard. He's a 2/2, and he says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you make yourself a little flying 2/2 Drake. This thing's great. When I first started playing Magic, I built this, and I had a bad time because Spellslinger was too advanced a strategy for me at that time. And to tell you the truth, I have not returned to Spellslinger strategies. They're not for me, which is why I want to thank you guys so much for all the great suggestions for Storm and her storming off trigger in tonight's deck tech. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight. Talrand Sky Summoner is rad. Talrand Sky Summoner has been printed to death, y'all. I bet you can. It's hard to find a copy of this thing that is over $1. It's also really fun for new players, and it's worded really like simply. You know, you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you make a 2/2. He himself is a 2/2. Step Between Worlds. Rainbow Pupster wants us to play a Step Between Worlds. Step Between Worlds is a 5-mana sorcery that says each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into the library. Each player who does draws 7 cards. Exile Step Between Worlds. Okay, this thing's good. You can also plot it for 6 mana to cast it for free on a later turn. So if we... Alright. R1, I see... We're going to do your suggestion next. So we're just going to talk about this. Okay, so... If we copy this thing, right, there's a few ways we can do this. So if we plot it and we plan to do it on a later turn, that's great, because then we can use all the mana from store. Okay, so we can plot it, so we can plan to cast it for free. Plotting it for free, it lets us cast it for free on a later turn. So we could use all our mana for spells in our first main phase, maybe do something spicy with Storm, and then we could just do this, and we might be able to just draw ourselves out. I feel like Thassa's Oracle, or like a Jace the Mind, not Jace the Mind Sculptor, the Jace Wield of Mysteries, which is just a Laboratory Maniac. We could do a Laboratory Maniac with this thing. It does hit every player, and, you know, getting rid of your opponent's hands and just destabilizing them and fucking up their plans is a viable strategy. Watch out, though. A lot of casual tables don't like that. I personally love it, though. Like, drawing cards is normally always a positive thing. So R1 wants us to do a Riding the Delu Horse. Riding the Delu Horse. What the hell is a Delu Horse? Riding the Delu Horse is a 3-mana green sorcery. It's 350 American dollars. And it says that any one creature gets +2/+2 and gains horsemanship. So, guys, I'm not going to pretend to know what horsemanship does. I've had someone explain horsemanship to me, and I zoned out because I'm like, why the fuck are we playing with horsemanship? Like, if you guys want to look up what horsemanship means, you can do that. All right, so Lost in Sound suggests a Sensei's Divining Top. I think Horsemanship is like, it can only be blocked by other creatures with Horsemanship. Sensei's Divining Top, though. Okay, so my friend runs a Joyra Artifact Storm build. And Sensei's Divining Top is how he wins. Because Sensei's Divining Top, if you can make things cheap and if you can cast them off your deck, or if you can cast the top for free, you can go through your whole deck with a Sensei's Divining Top. Sensei's Divining Top is also just a really good value piece, and any deck you put a Sensei's Divining Top in is typically a little bit better. It lets you kind of set up your draws. It lets you dig a few cards deeper. It also forces card draw. It itself is not very punishing because it's 1 mana. So when you put it on top of your library, it's only 1 mana to put back out. You can pay additional mana, and then you can look at the next 3 cards. This thing's great, y'all. If you are skeptical of the $40 price tag, I would get a proxy. I'm a Printing Proxies affiliate. So if you want to spend 75 cents instead of 40 American dollars on this little 1 mana rock, which fixes your deck, check out printingproxies.com. Enter the Enigma is solid. Says the inverse. The inverse. I almost typed the inverse into the search bar. Wait, inverse. Where'd you go? Where'd your suggestion go, inverse? Enter the Enigma. Enter the Enigma. Enter the Enigma. Okay, Enter the Enigma is a 1 mana blue sorcery that was printed in the Duskmourn expansion last year. Says target creature can't be blocked this turn and you draw yourself a card. This thing's great. So I imagine the way that we're going to be casting this thing, or the way that I would prefer to cast our Enter the Enigma, is during our first main phase. If someone has flyers, we can use this thing to make Storm unblockable. We can draw a card in our main phase, and that we may have something to cast in our second main phase. We do need Storm to hit. We do need Storm to connect if we want Storm to get our storming triggers. This thing's also 1 mana, so we can cost multiple little cantrippy spells in our first main phase to set up for that really splashy Storm trigger. It also has draw a card, so even if like it's the last card in our hand and we need to storm off with something, it's a 1 mana thing that draws us a ton of cards if we storm off with it. This card works great before Storm deals damage, and it also works great after. Very cool suggestion. You know what I want? Torment of Hailfire as my commander. Torment of Hailfire as a Grixis. No surprise that a commander player known as Grixis wants to run Torment of Hellfire in the command zone. Funny Guy says a Red Death, though. Red Death is not something I'm familiar. Oh, this thing came out in Fallout. I opened one of these, and it's probably going to live in a binder for the rest of my life. The Red Death is a 2 mana 1/3 crab mutant with an activated ability where we can tap it, go target creature an opponent controls, and that player draws a card. You add red. Go target creature an opponent controls, that player draws a card, and you add red. So what we could do with our little Red Death shipwright is we could just use him for value, right? He's a little 2 mana creature. He's got activated abilities. We goad Storm. Oh wait, fuck, we can't goad Storm. It has to be a creature an opponent controls. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little lost for this one. Maybe if we're doing a friendly Storm deck and we want to help our opponents a little bit. The thing about, if we could just target Storm with this thing's ability, this thing would be coconuts. It would make a mana, it would draw a card, and it would do that every turn. I really wish this thing could target Storm. Big Score. Oh, Big Score is rad, y'all. I love Big Score. There's so many little 4 mana red sorceries that you have to discard a card, but when you do that, you draw 2 cards and you make 2 treasures. Big Score is one of them. This one's an instant. Instant speed, as initial cost to cast a spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards, create 2 treasure tokens. Because of the Storm copies, because we are not casting the copies of Storm's storming trigger, giving things Storm, I've said Storm like 500 times today. We don't have to pay the additional cost, so this won't cause us to discard our hand when we storm off with it. Thank you, Surdy G, for the follow. I really appreciate it. I'm Bigger Gamer Magic. I use green screen effects and graphics to make silly little Magic the Gathering videos all over the internet and on lives. We do live deck building, and tonight we are doing Storm, Force of Nature. If you want to suggest a card for our streamer Teamer Storm deck, and if you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. And if you want to see what everybody else has been suggested for our Teamer Storm deck, you can check out the Moxfield page. That's in the link tree on the profile. And if you want to vote on what commanders we talk about during the stream, you can head to the Bigger Gayer Discord and you can vote there. Thank you for hanging out with me. This is Vandal Blast, and Vandal Blast is definitely something you should be running in Commander. It's been reprinted a bunch of times. I'm pretty sure you can get this thing for under $5. They came out with a full art version in Commander Masters, and I'm pretty sure the full art version is less than $5. It's a 1-mana red sorcery that says destroy target artifact you don't control. You know what? Like, let's do a silly little scenario. Let's say we start a game. Let's say we are the second player in turn rotation. The first player plays a turn 1 Soul Ring. We play a mountain, and we blow up their turn 1 Soul Ring. That alone is really fun in Commander. In my opinion, it's just like it's so fucking petty. It's so silly, but the real reason you want to run Vandal Blast in most of your red Commander decks is because you can overload it for a total of 5 mana and you destroy all artifacts you don't control. And it's worded so diabolically. 5 mana, red, destroy all artifacts you don't control. It's great, y'all. So you could be running this in a Storm deck, or like in an Izzet Storm deck where you're relying on mana rocks for ramp, and this thing gets rid of everybody's rocks. But not your rocks. Our rocks are fine. This thing's very cool. It's great. I run it in almost every deck I play red in. Zada Hedron Grinder. Zada Hedron Grinder. Zada Hedron Grinder. This thing. Okay, this is the coolest art for Zada Hedron Grinder, in my opinion. This is the art from March of the Machines. It's a legendary goblin ally, it's 4 mana, and it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Zada, you copy that spell for each other creature you control that the spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. This thing's very cool. So oftentimes in a Zada deck, you're also running Kranko to create a board, or you're running Goblins to create a board. And you're running like things like Expedite. You're running things that like say give target thing haste, draw a card, or give target thing trample, draw a card, or give target thing +3/+3. Zada's very fun. Zada is a Storm deck when you take her into Siege territory in her own right. Zada's very cool, and I really like this is this is the coolest looking Zada art to me, and I'm really glad that this one's only 40 cents. Post of Cards and Drip says, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it. I'm Bigger Gayer Magic. I use green screen effects to make silly little magic guy. Hey James, how are you doing? This makes me want to run an Izzet deck into a Storm Force of Nature deck. And what about a classic with Giant Growth? Giant Growth, hell yeah, we'll run Giant Growth. So we were talking about cards that target things, because Zada copies the things for things when you target Zada with them. You can target Zada and just give something +3/+3 until end of turn at instant speed. In Storm, this could be very cool. Storm has to connect. When I say connect, I mean deal combat damage. Storm needs to deal combat damage to get Storm's storming trigger of giving instants and sorceries Storm. And we want to also cast cards in our first main phase or during combat, because we want the Storm count to be more than 1 for when we're storming off with our Storm triggers. And this is a 1 little mana instant. We can cast it and add to the Storm count, and we can make Storm a little bit more significant. Notable amount about Storm's trigger. Storm's trigger doubles if you give Storm Double Strike. Strike it rich. Strike it rich. I don't think I'm familiar with Strike it rich. Strike it rich. Strike it rich. Strike It Rich is a 1 mana sorcery that says you create yourself a treasure token. You can flash it back for 3 mana to make another treasure token. This thing's great, actually. It's 1 mana, make a treasure token. So the treasure token it makes pays for it, because you can sack the treasure for mana. And you need 3 things to win with your storming off instants and sorcery Storm deck. You need a crap ton of cards. You need a crap ton of mana. That's where the treasures come in. And you need a way to end the game. This thing's also great because it has flashback. So if we cast it in the early game before we have Storm on the battlefield, maybe we want to ramp into Storm with this thing, we can cast it for flashback in our second main phase. And because we're casting it, Storm doesn't say from hand, right? Yeah, so when we cast this thing with flashback from our graveyard, it will get the Storm trigger. That's pretty cool. So it's great in the early game. We can ramp into Storm, or we can make a ton of treasures when we're attempting to win the game. This thing's very cool. I totally ignored that it's a damage trigger, damn. Hey, Tommy Two Hands, good to see you again. Oh, Jake Perkins wants us to run an Archmage Emeritus. So we are running Archmage Emeritus for sure, but he's so good, we're gonna talk about him again. He's a 4-mana blue creature. He came out in Strixhaven. He's $6, and he says, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. This thing's great. It's so good. Especially because of that little word copy there. Storming off trigger to give things storm are copies. So we're gonna draw cards off the copies as well. I feel like an Archmage Emeritus is really all the card draw we need in a Storm CDH leaning deck to really win a game, in my opinion. But also I'm not a CDH player, and this is the first time that we've done a Commander on live deck building that I feel shines way harder in CDH than in casual. Most of the things I can talk about within like a casual setting, but I don't think Storm is good in casual Commander, honestly, because Storm, the strategy, needs to pop off like immediately and all at once to win. The inverse says a Brotherhood Regalia. Yeah, Brotherhood Regalia does slap. Brotherhood Regalia. Brotherhood Regalia is cool. It got printed in the Assassin's Creed expansion, and it says that you pay 2 to cast a piece of equipment, you equip it for 3, or a legendary creature for 1. Hey, Storm's legendary. And the equipped creature has Ward 2, is an assassin in addition to its other types, and can't be blocked. Let's talk about it. So the most significant words on this card, the Brotherhood Regalia, for me, cannot be blocked. We need Storm to not be blocked. Because if Storm Blitz blocked, and she doesn't deal damage, we don't storm off with her Storming Storm triggers on instants and sorceries. We need Storm to not be blocked. We need Storm to connect. So that's great for this. Also, it gives it Ward 2. Storm will draw removal. Because if Storm deals combat damage, it's possible that you just win the game in your second main phase. So Storm needs to get got, or you're gonna lose. So giving her Ward 2 and giving her a little bit of tax to your opponents to remove her is really good as well. Also, it's really aggressively costed too. So we cast this for 2. If we have this in our opening hand, we can cast on turn 2 for 2. It's only 1 mana to equip. That's great. That's great, y'all. This thing's really good. Good suggestion. And it ensures that Storm connects. Seize the day. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, I'm BGM. I am a video editor and streamer, and on lives and streams, we do live deck building. Storm Force of Nature is our commander today, and if you want to suggest a card for our Storm Force of Nature deck, you can put it in the comments, and if you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. And if you want to see what people are suggesting for our Storm Force of Nature deck, you can check out the Moxfield deck list in the link tree. Thanks for hanging out with me. Someone suggested this here, Seize the Day. It's a 4-mana, $20 red sorcery. I have no idea what set it's from. And you untap target creature, and after this phase, there's an additional combat phase, followed by an initial main phase, and you can flash it back for 3. That's really good. Okay, so ways that we can get multiple triggers off of Storm. Multiple combats. That's great. Multiple combats, multiple damages of Storm. We get multiple triggers. When we have multiple triggers of our commander resolve, we are giving something multiple instances of Storm. So we are like Fibonacci sequencing out the amount of copies we are making. Another way we can do multiple triggers of Storm is Double Strike. Because of the way that Storm is worded, because Storm is worded on deal damage, Double Strike will cause triggered abilities that say deal damage to trigger an additional time, if it hits a player both times. So like, let's say the first strike damage hits the creature, destroys it, and it's actually, I'm not sure. We're not gonna. Past in Flames though. Past in Flames is cool. Past in Flames is a. Oh shit! This is a rad reprint. This must be from the Chandra spellbook, or maybe Corset 19. I'm not positive. This thing is a 4-mana red sorcery, and it says that each sorcery in instant in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is its mana cost. This is great. So we can cast this thing. We do not want to storm off with this thing. We do not want to use Storm's triggers on this thing, because giving it flashback once, we don't get benefits from storming off of this thing. Thank you very much, Satyr Star Killer. Thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it. So this is just a way that we can use our little value instants of sorceries in our graveyard again. So I imagine we can cast this thing during our first main phase and deal some damage with Storm at combat, and then in our second main phase, we start casting stuff out of our graveyard. Or maybe, yeah, that's how I imagine we do it. Because we don't want to do it in our second main phase, because then it'll eat up our Storm trigger and storming this multiple times doesn't really help us. Something notable about the way that this thing is it's got flashback, meaning that we can later cast it for 5 and then cast things from our graveyard again. This thing's really cool. Also, I'm really glad that they gave it this sick-ass art treatment. I don't know what the other Past in Flames look like. There's like one in Doctor Who, and there's one with like a very generic witch on it, but this one feels like the coolest art to me, and I'm glad it's only $3. Good suggestion, thank you. It's the Chandra Spellbrook print. This is a Chandra, okay. Twinning Staff, Stater Starkiller says a Twinning Staff. Let's talk about Twinning Staff. So Twinning Staff is a great little Strixhaven card. Is it just from Strixhaven? It's a 3 mana artifact, and it says that if you would copy a spell, or one or more, if you would copy a spell 1 or more times, and said copy it that many times, +1, and then you can activate it for 7 mana, and you can copy something. This thing's great. If this thing just hangs out on the battlefield, it's gonna add an extra copy to all our Storm things. It's great. It also, we can pay 7, we can copy target instant sorcery spell. We may choose new targets for the copy. That's fine all by itself too. It is a lot, it's a big mana investment for 7 mana to activate that. But, you know, it's cool. It also just hangs out and gives you copies. What do I think of I Heart Reyna? Good to see you say it. What do I think about Aether Grift? It seems like a really great set for Commander. Honestly, so when I heard there was going to be a NASCAR set for Magic the Gathering, I let out a deep sigh, y'all. Dual Caster, yeah, we'll pull up Dual Caster Maids while I talk about Aether. So yeah, I let out a deep sigh when I found out there was a racing themed set. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't a big fan of Thunder Junction. I don't like the theme set. I didn't like the cowboy theme. Aether Drift, I will tell you, I have a lot more a positive opinion of Aether Drift so far than Outlaws of Thunder. I didn't like the Outlaws of Thunder Junction. There were some undoubtedly very exciting cards printed in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but I don't like that it happened as a thing. But Aether Drift seems cool. I like that it's seemingly Aether Drift is going to move the story forward for Magic the Gathering. Because I'm not gonna lie, I haven't given a shit about the story since like War of the Spark. Dual Caster Mage is a 3 mana red human wizard. It's a $2 flashy 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, copy target instant or sorcery spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. This thing's very cool. You know, it's another way that we can copy instants and sorceries. I don't know. I'm not a CEDH person, and I imagine that the only way to really have Storm be viable is in a CEDH build. I don't feel like Storm's works good if you're trying to build her casually. Like, because when a Storm deck needs to win all at once, and that kind of lends itself to CEDH to me. And this thing is a creature. I don't know. Do you guys... I don't know. It's cool. I don't know if I would run it. So my skepticism and it's a creature. It does copy things. It is 3, I don't know. What do you guys think? I am torn if I would put it in Storm myself. But also, I don't build Storm strategies ever. Leyline of Resonance. Leyline of Resonance. Leyline of Resonance is this thing. It's red. If it enters the battlefield, you start with it on the... I'm sorry, if it is in your opening hand, you start with it on the battlefield. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single creature you control, copy that spell. I would run the hell out of this. This thing's great. So we saw like Giant Growth, we saw like an Expedite that gives something haste and you draw a card. We saw like give something hexproof, draw a card, give something indestructible until end of turn, draw a card. This thing's very cool. A lot of our card draw is stapled to 1 and 2 mana little cantrippy instants and sorceries, and this thing will give us an extra copy of those right off the rip. Right off the rip. Yeah, this thing's very cool. I also like that it's $2. Leyline, it's definitely not the most powerful Leyline. It's kind of, I feel like it'd be really good in Zada, Heater and Grinder too. Alright guys, I'm getting a little bit tired. If you are just now joining me, I am BGM. I use green screen effects to make silly little Magic Gathering videos all over the internet. And on lives, we do live deck building. We've been building Storm Force of Nature. We're going to take a few more suggestions. If you see a suggestion over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list, and you can check out the Moxfield deck list on the link tree. And if you want to vote on the commanders for the rest of the week, you can head to the Discord to do that. Thank you for hanging out with me. We are going to do 5 more cards and call it a night. And the first one's going to be this Quantum Misalignment. We actually saw this card. I saw this card for the very first time yesterday, or maybe. It was a live that was recent. It's a 5 mana blue sorcery, and it says create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it isn't legendary. So we can make copies of Storm with this thing. It also has rebound, which means that if we exile it as we resolve it, we can cast a free version of it at the beginning of our upkeep, which is great. So for 5 mana, we cast this thing, we make a copy of Storm, and then at the next upkeep, we make another copy. But let's talk about it. So what if we get Storm's trigger and we make an exponential amount of storms? How crazy would that be? I feel like that's a magical Christmas land of this card. You get a storm trigger, and you make like 5 copies of Storm, and then unless someone kills all your storms, you're gonna win the game. Because Storm's ability is balanced by dealing combat damage, and it's got a lot harder to block multiple flyers than it is to block a singular flyer. This thing's very cool. It's $7. It was printed in Doctor Who, and I actually really like this effect. I like this effect a lot. Normally, if someone's making copies of the commander, they're doing it with a card called Helm of the Host. The Inverse, our number 4 card. Thank you, The Inverse, for hanging out with us tonight. You suggest an Untimely Malfunction. Untimely Malfunction. Untimely Malfunction is not a card I'm familiar with, to tell you the truth. Untimely Malfunction is 2 mana. It's instant. It was printed in Duskmourn. It's $4. I love a modal spell. Modal spells feel really good to me in Commander because you can kind of tailor it to the situation. You can destroy an artifact at instant speed. You can change the target of target spell or ability with a single target at instant speed, or up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn. Oh my god, this thing is so good. Oh my god, this thing is so... Even outside of Storm, this thing is good. So we got a little bit of artifact removal. It's a braid. It can be a braid. Or you can just change the target of target spell or ability. It's a braid when we want to remove things, or it's like a deflecting, it's like a deflecting SWAT-like effect. It's not free, but we can save Storm with it. Our Commander Storm, we need Commander Storm to win the game, because that's how we storm off, is with Storm's deal damage trigger. And we need to protect Storm. And this thing, if they're using spot removal, we can use this thing to blow up their thing instead. And I love that. I feel like that's the most powerful mode on this here Untimely Malfunction. Thank you, The Inverse, for the suggestion. I had not seen this thing before. 1 or 2 target creatures can't block. That's also a significant mode for our Commander Storm, because Storm needs to deal combat damage. And if someone has, like, I don't know, a big flying scary dragon that can just get our girl, this thing can make them not block. This thing, every single mode of this thing is great. That's probably why it's a $4 uncommon. This thing's great, y'all. That's our number 4 pick. We're going to do 3 more, and Frost Ace, friend of the channel, says Finale of Promise. Finale of Promise. Is that the green one? It's the red one. Excuse me. Okay, so the finales were printed, I want to say, in core set 19. This thing is a red, and X. You may cast up to 1 target instant or sorcery spell, and up to 1 target... one target instant card, and up to 1 target instant or sorcery from your graveyard, each with mana value X or less, without paying for them. If a spell is cast this way, would be put into your graveyard, exile instead. If X is 10 or more, copy each of those spells twice. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is it, y'all. I feel like this is a viable way to end the game. If we have like a lightning bolt in our graveyard and we can get this thing off, we can probably deal a significant amount of damage. Yeah, we could definitely do a significant amount of damage. Or if we have that modal spell that says it deals 3 damage to each opponent, this thing is going to do an inordinate amount of damage. This thing would be very cool to copy if we have a big, fat, juicy graveyard. Storming off with this thing would be absolutely nuts. It would take a long time to resolve that. That's our number 3 pick, is a Finale of Promise. It's kind of open-ended because it really cares about what you have in your graveyard. Thank you for the suggestion. All right, and now we're going to do 2 more. I Heart Reyna wants us to run a Pyromancer's Ascension. Pyromancer's Ascension. Pyromancer's Ascension. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, we've been doing live deck building. We built Storm Force of Nature. You can check out the suggestions in the Moxfield deck list. That is in the profile. Pyromancer Ascension. Pyromancer Ascension. It's 2 mana. It's an enchantment. It came out in the Chandra's Spellbook. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may... I'm sorry. Whenever you cast an sorcery spell that has the same name as a card in your graveyard, you may put a quest counter on this thing. Whenever you cast an sorcery spell with Pyromancer's Ascension, it has 2 or more quest counters on it. You may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. All right, so I was thinking about Storm for the last hour and a half from a CEDH standpoint. And actually, something else we could do, we could bring this thing into Relentless territory. There are 2 Relentless sorceries we could run. One is called Dragon's Approach, and the other is called Slime Against Humanity. We could actually do Storm as a Relentless deck and it not be a CEDH build. Thank you for helping me realize that. And Pyromancer's Ascension really wants you to be Relentless in Commander, or it wants you to be in a multi-card format like Standard. Alright, once again, I am BGM. Hey everybody. Relentless Assault. Alright, so we are actually not going to do one more. We're going to do a few more. Relentless Assault. Dream Demon, thank you so much for your patience over on Twitch. Relentless Assault. Hey Equinox Paradox, Relentless Assault. Relentless Assault. Relentless Assault is a 4-mana red sorcery. Untap all creatures that attack this turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase, but an additional main phase. Great, so a way to abuse Storm's triggers is by giving us multiple combats. Multiple combats can give us multiple Storm triggers. And if we can give an instant or sorcery multiple instances of Storm, we're going to create a crazy amount of value. This thing is a way to do that. Another way to get multiple Storm triggers is by giving her Double Strike. Because of the way she's worded, if you give her Double Strike, because it says deal damage, Double Strike, if she swings unblocked, will hit and deal damage 2 times, giving you multiple triggers. Double Strike is such an overpowered keyword, y'all. Alright, thank you, Dream Demon, for the suggestion. I appreciate it. Alright, we're gonna do 2 more. Alright, funny guy, we're gonna do a fumble. We're gonna fumble. I love Fumble! I love this card. I love this card so much, I move it around. It is such a great piece of interaction. Fumble is a 2-mana blue instant. It's $1. Guys, I'm not gonna lie. If this card was $5, I would buy it. It says return target creature to its owner's hand. Gain control of all auras and equipment that were attached to it. Then attach them to another creature. I love this card so much. This card is so fun in Commander. Even if your opponents aren't in like a Voltron strategy, even if they aren't running auras, they're probably running Swiftfoot boots. And if you jack someone's shoes, it's gonna be memorable, and it's gonna be a memorable, funny moment for your friends. I love Fumble. Also, if someone's playing like Light Paws, or if they're doing an equipment strategy, you just yank their board. You take their whole ass board with this thing at instant speed. It is so silly. And even if they don't have anything like that, if we storm off with this thing, we just return a bunch of creatures to their opponent's hand. We can give it Storm and basically make it like a little Aetherize or like a Cyclonic Rift almost for creatures. I love Fumble. I'm glad Fumble's only $1. Fumble was printed in one of my favorite sets, Battle Bond. Y'all should check out Battle Bond. There is so much Commander gas and so many good cheap cards from Battle Bond. Fumble's one of them. Alright, our last card is going to be a 1,000-Year Storm. I believe this is a Izzet tutor. 1,000-Year Storm is... Oh, it's not a tutor. It's a 6-mana Izzet enchantment. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant sorcery spell you cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy. This thing, if this thing was a creature, this would be a great commander all by itself, y'all. It's 50 cents. Originally printed somewhere in Ravnica, recently reprinted in Foundations. This thing's great. So Storm, the way I imagine we take a Storm turn is we maybe target her with some little cantrippy things in our first main phase, or if we're doing instant speed, maybe during combat. That way we add to the Storm count before she does damage. Because when she does damage, she gives something Storm, and then when we cast our next instant or sorcery, we get a bunch of Storm triggers. This thing's very cool. If we do play it in that kind of way, this thing's gonna go absolutely coconuts. Great suggestion, y'all. All right, everybody. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me for the last hour and 45 minutes. I am BGM, also known as Bigger Gayer Magic. On lives, we do live deck building. we built Storm Force of Nature. If you want to check out the cards that were in Storm of Nature, suggested by all you lovely viewers, check out the Moxfield page in the link tree. And if you want to vote on commanders we talk about for the rest of the week, check out the Bigger Gayer Discord server, also in the link tree. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate you bunches. Take care, and I hope you all draw